The Galactic Archive Station Theta 9 floated silently on the edge of the Andromeda Fringe, a massive hub of knowledge and diplomacy where thousands of alien species came together to preserve history, settle disputes, and study the universe's ancient past. It was a place filled with logic, formality, and pride, a pride rooted in eons of carefully maintained truths. Among the many brilliant scholars who lived there was Commander Raya Val, a respected figure from the Sarathi Dominion, known for her sharp mind and absolute loyalty to galactic order. She had seen many newcomers arrive, eager and naive, their curiosity often more dangerous than helpful. So, when she was told a human historian had requested a private audience to access a restricted Vault 1 that even she had never dared to open, her first thought was that this Earthling must be either arrogant or completely lost. The humans were still considered young by galactic standards, barely 200 years into interstellar travel, with no great legacy or power, just stories of survival and stubbornness. Yet, when Elias Rourke stepped into the great chamber where Raya Val waited, something about his calm, steady gaze and the small satchel he carried made her pause. He was not dressed in formal robes, nor did he bow like most newcomers. Instead, he walked to the central terminal, placed a strange device on it, and spoke with a tone that silenced even the ambient hum of the archive. "I'm here to unlock the truth you've all buried." Raya Val narrowed her eyes, masking her surprise behind practiced discipline. She asked how a human could possibly claim to know something the galactic historians had missed for thousands of years, and Elias answered not with a lecture, but by pulling out a map made of metal and stardust, an ancient star chart that shimmered when he held it up to the archive's light. The moment it touched the terminal's scanning field, symbols and coordinates began to glow, some in languages long forgotten, others in patterns that only a trained archivist like Raya Val could partially recognize. Her confidence began to crack as she leaned closer and realized that the chart matched sectors that had been erased from modern navigation databases, black zones marked inaccessible or unverified, places people had simply stopped asking about. She demanded to know where he found it, and Elias replied simply, "It was left behind by the first ones before the architects wiped it from memory." The mention of the architects made Raya Val stiffen. They were known as the ancient builders of the galactic highways and stargates, mysterious and long extinct, revered by most species as near gods of progress. Suggesting they had erased history was borderline heresy. But Elias was not finished. He leaned forward, his voice low, steady, almost regretful, and said, "You've all been lied to." Those words hit harder than any weapon. Before she could respond, the vault, the sealed chamber no one had touched for over 6,000 cycles, began to hum, lights flickering along its frame. The map in Elias's hand pulsed once, then dissolved into threads of light that flowed into the vault's surface. Symbols began to rearrange themselves, and a voice, neither male nor female, whispered in a dialect that hadn't been heard in an age. The terminal confirmed something impossible. Human DNA had unlocked a restricted Sarathi-class archive. Raya Val drew back in shock, not sure whether to raise an alarm or ask more questions. She chose the latter, her curiosity now battling her duty. "Who was this man, really?" Elias explained he was just a historian, not a soldier or spy, and that his ancestors had preserved fragments of knowledge deep beneath Earth's crust, passed down through generations in secret, waiting for the right moment to re-enter the galactic conversation. That moment, he said, was now. The vault's heavy doors groaned as they opened, revealing a dimly lit chamber filled with artifacts, scrolls, and devices that hummed with dormant energy. Raya Val stepped inside first, scanning for traps or inconsistencies. What she saw next unraveled centuries of belief. There were Sarathi artifacts in there, yes, but also symbols from species she'd never seen, and at the center, a pedestal with a human handprint etched into it millennia old, and yet undeniably human. Elias approached and placed his hand on the imprint. The chamber came alive, light blooming from the walls as projections flickered into the air, forming a massive star map unlike anything in current records. It showed the galaxy not as it was now, but as it had been divided into clusters of unified species, with Earth at the center. Raya Val's breath caught as she saw a figure in ancient armor standing beside a circle of delicate species, long extinct, and others that were still very much alive, shaking hands. forming an alliance that predated the architects themselves. Her voice was barely more than a whisper when she asked, "How is this possible?" Elias looked at her, not with pride, but with a deep sadness. "Because we were here first," he said, "and we were removed." The air grew thick with tension. For Raya, everything she knew, the history she had memorized, the foundation of galactic unity was now under question. She had grown up believing in the order of things, that every species had risen according to merit and discovery. But now she stood before undeniable proof that the galaxy had once followed a different truth, one buried deliberately. She didn't know what frightened her more, the idea that Elias was right or the possibility that others had already known and kept it hidden. Before she could process further, the chamber lights dimmed and a sharp pulse echoed from deep within the vault. A console lit up with an ancient symbol and began transmitting a signal, one that reached far beyond the station. Rayaval's eyes widened. It was a beacon. Elias didn't move. "It's begun," he said quietly. Alarms began to sound through the archive halls. The vault had triggered a long, dormant emergency channel tied to a frequency no longer in use, one that predates the council itself. Rayaval stared at Elias, torn between her training and the undeniable truth playing out before her. The archive's AI voice confirmed it. A galaxy-wide broadcast had been initiated from Theta 9. The lie was breaking open, and the universe was about to hear a story it had long forgotten. As the ancient vault doors slowly creaked open, Rayaval felt her heartbeat quicken, a rare moment of uncertainty for someone who had spent her life wrapped in logic and discipline. She stepped carefully into the chamber, light flickering across her pale, silver-toned skin, eyes scanning every inch of the vast space. Dust floated like mist, disturbed by the sudden breath of fresh energy that now flowed through the forbidden place. Behind her, Elias Rourke followed without hesitation, as though he had walked this path before, though Rayaval knew that could not be possible. And yet, the way he moved with purpose, with confidence, it was clear this was more than just a lucky discovery for him. The vault was ancient, even by galactic standards, and lined with shelves and platforms holding devices long thought lost to time. Scrolls made from unfamiliar materials, glowing softly with encoded knowledge, floated in protective fields. Some of them bore the Sarathi script, but altered, older, so old that even she, a high-ranking archivist, had to squint and think deeply to decode the simplest words. Others bore symbols that didn't match any known civilization in the Council's record, and yet Elias approached them like meeting old friends, his fingers tracing their curves with respect and a strange, silent reverence. The centerpiece of the vault, however, was a platform that rose from the ground as Elias stepped closer, responding to his DNA signature as if it had been waiting. It projected a full holographic sphere of the galaxy, but not in its current state. It was a vision of the galaxy from millions of years ago, its borders drawn differently, the star systems labeled with names long forgotten. Rayaval's training screamed at her that this was impossible. History had been carefully recorded and verified by generations of scholars. But as she looked at the glowing map, she recognized the unmistakable sign of unaltered truth, the kind that no council data manipulation could fake. There, right in the galactic core, was a symbol she had never seen on any modern chart. A human symbol. Earth had not only been known, it had once been at the center of a massive alliance that connected distant star systems and advanced civilizations. Elias didn't speak at first. He just let the image hang in the air, letting the weight of it settle over her. Rayaval could feel her beliefs unraveling, like old cloth exposed to too much truth. She asked how he knew about this place, how a simple historian from a minor Earth settlement could access something that had been hidden for millennia. Elias answered in his usual calm voice, explaining that fragments of this truth had survived on Earth, passed down by families who never forgot the old names, hidden from governments, buried in stories and songs that were never meant to make sense until now. His people had prepared, generation after generation, waiting for the day someone would be strong enough to come back and finish what had been started. But why now? Why him? Rayaval pressed further, needing to understand. Elias told her that the architects, those mythical beings who had supposedly vanished after creating the stargates, had never truly disappeared. Instead, they had rewritten history, cleansing records, manipulating the rise of newer species, and covering the evidence that humanity had once stood equal to, or perhaps above, them. They didn't just erase Earth from the archives, they erased a whole chapter of galactic civilization. And the galaxy, unaware and trusting, built its future on a lie. As she listened, Raya Val felt something shift deep inside her, not just doubt, but fear. Because if Elias was telling the truth, then everything the Council stood for was built on foundations of silence and shadow. She asked him why the architects had done this, and he answered with a single word: fear. Humanity had advanced too quickly, formed alliances too easily, and had begun unlocking technologies that even the architects did not fully understand. So, in the name of maintaining control, the architects had made a choice: wipe them out, scatter the survivors, and erase every trace of their influence. Raya Val turned toward a row of crystal-like memory cubes lining the chamber wall. Each one shimmered with color, whispering in lost languages. She reached for one and activated it. Instantly, the room filled with a flickering projection, a recording from millions of years ago. The image was shaky, but it showed a great meeting hall with dozens of species seated in a circle. At the center stood a human woman, her voice firm, speaking in a unified language. She was offering peace, unity, and a system of shared technology. Behind her stood what looked like early versions of modern starships, all bearing the same human crest seen on Elias's map. The memory ended with the image breaking into static, but the message was clear: Earth had once been a beacon, not a bystander. Before Raya Val could say anything, a loud alarm blared from the archive's outer systems. The station's AI reported an outgoing transmission, one that had activated the moment the memory cube was touched. It wasn't just any message. It was a distress beacon coded in pre-architect language. And worse, it had reached beyond the archive's secure zone, across the galactic network. Elias stepped back as if he'd been expecting this. He looked at Raya Val and said, "They're coming." She asked who he meant, already suspecting the answer. His face was serious, eyes dark with knowledge that weighed heavily. "The architects," he said. "Or whatever is left of them. They've been watching, waiting for signs that someone remembered." Raya Val turned toward the vault entrance, her mind spinning. If the architects were indeed still alive or operating from the shadows, then opening this vault had just painted a target on their backs, and maybe the entire station. She had two options: arrest Elias and silence this truth, or help him reveal it and face the wrath of powers that had erased worlds before. She looked back at the artifacts, the evidence no one could deny, and for the first time in her career, she didn't know which side her duty belonged to. Outside the chamber, the lights of Theta 9 dimmed slightly, as if sensing the shift in balance. Across the stars, dormant sensors activated. Silent machines blinked away. And somewhere, in a place beyond map space, ancient eyes turned toward the archive once more. The council chamber on Station Theta 9, usually filled with the calm hum of debate and structured diplomacy, had erupted into chaos. Screens buzzed with warnings. Encrypted messages poured in from the outer colonies, and across the high circular room, representatives of dozens of species argued in harsh tones. The beacon from the Forbidden Vault had not only reached the heart of the archive, it had traveled across secure channels, lighting up ancient frequencies no one had dared touch for thousands of years. Panic rippled through the dignitaries, and the word architects now passed from mouth to mouth like a shadow creeping across light. Commander Raya Val stood silent in the eye of the storm, her gaze fixed on the human historian who had caused it all. Elias Rourke didn't flinch, even as angry voices called for his immediate arrest, exile, or worse. His hands were steady, his eyes alert, but there was a tiredness to him now, as if carrying the truth had weighed him down long before this day came. The head of the council, a towering Athari judge named Solteth, demanded an explanation, asking how Elias had accessed a sealed vault, who had authorized him, and what his true intentions were. But Raya Val spoke before Elias could. Her voice cut through the noise, calm but firm, and the room slowly fell quiet. She told them what she had seen: the real artifacts, the untouched records, and the memory cube that showed a human woman offering unity before the rise of the architects. Some delegates scoffed, claiming it was manipulation. Others leaned forward, visibly shaken by her words. She was not just any commander. Her reputation for logic and integrity was unmatched. If she was shaken, the evidence had to be serious. Elias stepped forward then, slowly and carefully, like a man walking across cracked ice. He explained that his ancestors had hidden away fragments of the truth on Earth, protected by secrecy and tradition. He had grown up hearing stories that made no sense until he saw the map, touched the vault, and watched it come alive in his presence. His DNA had been the key not because he was special, but because his bloodline had been preserved unaltered, as was once common in early human leaders. The council chamber went quiet again as he said the words that made the room feel colder than space itself. The architects never left. They simply erased. That single sentence settled like frost on every skin, scale, and shell in the room. Delegates whispered among themselves, some accusing Elias of fear-mongering, others asking for proof beyond the vault. Raya Val presented copies of the memory data extracted from the Forbidden Room, and when they were displayed on the central screen, showing an ancient galaxy united under a forgotten alliance, the silence turned into unease. The pattern of star systems, the markings, even the names matched ancient myths and linguistic roots that had never been fully explained. It was too detailed, too accurate, and too clean to be a fabrication. Then came the second blow. A transmission arrived. It wasn't from any known system, but the Council's ancient translation protocols identified it quickly. The language was that of the architects, archaic, complex, and extinct by all official accounts. But the message was simple, and its tone felt more like a warning than a greeting. It said, "You have remembered. This should not have happened." Fear moved like lightning through the chamber. Some shouted for shields to be raised across the archive station. Others wanted the broadcast blocked, but the signal had already been logged across countless networks. The truth was out, and it could not be pulled back. Raya Val watched as the council began to fracture. Old alliances strained under pressure, species began accusing each other of having known the truth and hiding it, and the balance that had held the galaxy together for generations now trembled on the edge of collapse. But through it all, Elias remained still, only speaking when Raya Val asked him what came next. His reply was quiet but certain. "Now they'll come to silence us. But if we act fast, we can show the galaxy what they really did." He explained that the vault was only the beginning. On Earth, in the deepest parts of the planet untouched by colonization or digital mapping, a shard of memory remained, an ancient device built to record and preserve the original pact made between species before the architects rewrote history. That shard held visual, genetic, and technological evidence of the first alliance, and it had been hidden under layers of natural defenses, coded only to activate when a human bloodline connected to the founders returned. Elias believed it was still there, buried beneath the last known ruins of the old world, somewhere beneath the Siberian ice or deep under the Amazon cradle. But before they could begin any expedition, the council demanded a vote, detain the human and seal the vault again, or launch an investigation and risk awakening a force none of them truly understood. Many feared what lay beyond the truth. Others feared the reaction of their own people when they discovered their history was built on lies. Raya Val stood beside Elias when the vote began. The result was close, too close, but in the end, the council chose caution. Elias would be placed under protective custody, and the vault would be studied under surveillance. But Raya Val didn't agree. She had seen enough, and something inside her, something she didn't recognize, was stirring. It wasn't rebellion. It was, what? Clarity. She made a decision then and there, knowing it could end her career or worse. That night, under cover of the station's artificial sleep cycle, she unlocked Elias's chamber and led him through the secondary shuttle bays. A small Explorer-class vessel waited there, fueled and ready, its destination locked on Earth. Elias didn't ask questions. He only said, "You're risking everything." And she replied, "If I don't, then I never deserved anything." As they launched, distant sensors across the station blinked one by one, signaling detection. But it was too late. The ship jumped into hyperspace, leaving Veda 9 and its uncertain council behind. In their wake, the transmission from the architects replayed across the stars, growing louder and more frequent. Whatever silence had once protected the truth was now broken. Across the galaxy, old machines awakened, long-dead satellites spun to life, and in the black distance beyond the map sectors, a shape began to move, a ship, or perhaps a fleet, bearing symbols not seen in living memory. Ryaval stared at the stars ahead, knowing there would be no going back. The architects had returned, and the only hope of stopping them lay hidden beneath Earth's forgotten soil. The stars ahead of the small vessel shimmered as it exited hyperspace, slowing near Earth's orbit where silence felt heavier than space itself. Ryaval sat quietly in the co-pilot seat, her eyes fixed on the blue and green planet that had once been the center of a galactic alliance, now seen by most as nothing more than a forgotten cradle of an average species. Elias stood beside her, not in awe, but with a strange stillness, as if memories not his own were returning to him. The Earth looked peaceful, unaware of the storm coming its way. Far behind them, beyond the reach of common sensors, something vast was stirring. The architects, the ancient manipulators of truth and silence, had begun their return. They came not with diplomacy, but with precision, awakening ships that had rested inside hollow moons, black void stations, and invisible folds of space. They did not send warnings or calls for negotiation. Their machines moved like shadows across the void, silent and exact, heading not only for Earth but for every world that had received the truth signal. Meanwhile, Elias and Ryaval began their descent, navigating away from human cities, far from the eyes of Earth's current authorities. The signal from the vault had triggered something deep within the planet's crust coordinates that led to an ancient bunker buried under layers of rock and forgotten history, protected by natural obstacles and old technologies that still responded to Elias's genetic signature. They landed in a dense jungle near the equator, a place untouched by urban spread, where time still clung to the roots of giant trees and mist danced over the green canopy. The journey underground was not easy. They had to move through collapsed tunnels, deactivate long-abandoned defense grids, and face a strange sense of time distortion that warped their perception of distance and memory. Ryaval noticed Elias walking ahead as if drawn by something older than instinct, his steps guided by ancestral memory or perhaps a hidden connection to the place itself. At last, they reached a chamber unlike any structure she had ever seen, smooth, metallic walls that pulsed faintly with energy, covered in symbols that blended human and alien scripts, telling a story long forgotten. In the center, a large pedestal rose, its surface shaped to receive a handprint. Elias hesitated only for a moment, then pressed his palm against it. The room responded with a soft hum, and the walls came alive with light. Holograms appeared, spinning slowly maps, records, voices in languages that hadn't been heard for ages. And then a figure materialized, an ancient recording of the woman from the vault memory, a human leader standing among beings from every known race, including early architect forms that looked different from their modern silent machines. She spoke of peace, of shared power, of a council that once governed the galaxy together. Her final words warned of betrayal, of the rise of fear within the architects, and of a decision made in secret to end human leadership by erasing their legacy. As the message ended, the ground trembled not from the activation, but from something far above. Ryaval turned to the surface feed and saw the sky breaking open. A ship had arrived, not human, not council-made, but something older, darker, and colder. The architects had tracked them. The vessel hovered above the jungle like a god of silence, sending a pulse that knocked out communications and scrambled atmospheric sensors. Elias stared at the live feed, recognizing the shape from the old myth's ships shaped like inverted towers, engines silent, movement graceful and deadly. From its belly, smaller crafts dropped, searching, scanning. Ryaval grabbed the data core from the pedestal, locking it into a secure case. She knew there was no more time to explore, not now. They had found the evidence, but if they didn't escape, it would be buried again, this time forever. They ran through the tunnels as the ancient defense systems flickered back to life on their own, as if the place itself sensed the threat. Automated beams shot toward the intruding machines above, holding them back just long enough for Elias and Ryaval to reach the surface again. Smoke and fire filled the air now. Trees burned. The air was thick with dust and energy pulses from the architect's scouts. They sprinted to their ship, barely making it inside before one of the enemy drones struck the clearing. The blast threw them off balance, and the engines flickered, but Ryaval engaged the emergency liftoff. The ship lurched into the sky, dodging beams of energy that sliced through the jungle below, and just as it broke through the upper atmosphere, a direct hit grazed the rear stabilizer. Warning lights flashed, but Ryaval didn't stop. With shaking hands, she activated the jump sequence to a hidden council outpost far from common space. Just before the ship entered hyperspace, Elias looked out at Earth, his home, his origin, and whispered, "They will come for it next." When they arrived at the outpost, the news had already spread across secure channels. Council satellites had detected the architect's ship. Worlds that had dismissed Elias's claims now faced undeniable truth. The architects were real, awake, and no longer hiding. Some systems began shutting down travel. Others called for evacuation protocols. Panic started to spread faster than strategy. Back on Theta 9, the council was forced to reconvene. Soltith, the council's head, stood grim-faced, confirming that similar signals had been picked up near other ancient vaults, and that entire colonies had gone dark without explanation. Ships were missing. Stations were unresponsive. The return of the architects was not a legend anymore. It was a wave, spreading across space, erasing again. Elias and Ryaval arrived at the chamber once more, but this time, the human was not just a visitor. He was a messenger of a forgotten age, and in his hands was a data core that could reveal the true history to all. Some still doubted, others remained silent, afraid, but more and more voices began to rise calling for resistance, for a plan, for unity. And as Elias placed the core into the council's main relay, sending its content across trusted systems, he said only one thing: we were never meant to be forgotten. The images spread. The old alliance, the betrayal, the erased leaders, it was all there, undeniable. But in the depths of uncharted space, the architects had begun forming their answer. Their return was not simply about preventing discovery. It was about control. And now, as the truth awakened, so did their final protocol, something no one in the galaxy had prepared for. Across the stars, the truth began to spread like wildfire, unstoppable and undeniable. The core Elias had recovered revealed not just the story of a lost alliance, but something far more dangerous: the true nature of the architects and the final chapter they had erased. Inside the data were ancient recordings of meetings, personal logs, and a voice no one expected to hear: the original human leader whose words had once united the species of the galaxy. Her final message was clear: if this archive is found, then the architects have returned to finish what they started. The message explained how the architects, once protectors of knowledge, had grown fearful of humanity's influence and independence. They believed that by removing humans from power and rewriting history, they could control the future. But they were wrong, because even with memory erased and records destroyed, the truth had survived in fragments, in symbols, in language roots, in bloodlines, and now in Elias. As the data spread to secure systems, species across the galaxy began to remember pieces of the past that had never quite made sense. Cultures that spoke of mysterious allies, myths of a race that had helped build great cities, and prophecies that had been dismissed as fiction now made sense in a chilling, perfect way. Protests erupted on many worlds, demanding the truth be wrecked.